this is a tier list right here. So basically, I'm going to be doing every single spec for healing, DPS, tanking. And based off my 62 Sire kills with pugs, I'm going to determine, like, basically from what I've seen, from what I've experienced, from basically, like, I'm going to show you guys how well these classes perform and specs perform on Sire, on Heroic Sire. This is just strictly Heroic Sire, AOTC, what does well, what doesn't do well. First is Blood Death Knight. So there's two good things about Blood on this fight. First thing is AMZ. So same thing of any Death Knight, AMZ comes in handy for a lot of different parts in this fight. The second good thing with Blood Death Knight is that they can actually snap the boss whenever they want with their grip, I believe. For other classes, like for me, for instance, if I leap somewhere, I gotta wait a couple seconds for a boss to snap. But for Blood DKs, if they can position themselves somewhere good, they can immediately snap the boss, which is good if they know how to position themselves, when to position themselves. But beyond that, I mean, they're really slow. Like, they're not bad. Overall, they're not bad, but they're not really great either. So I'm going to throw them down as C. Because if they have AMZ and they can snap the boss, but, like, they're really slow, I just don't really like Blood Death Knights that much. I guess my biggest issue is that I've seen a lot of Blood Death Knights get knocked off, and they don't really have anything that's going to stop them from getting knocked off. Death's Advance, yes, but they get that. They can only use that for one knockback. Okay, BM Hunter. Probably, so the thing for BM Hunters is that their damage on the boss actually isn't that bad. I'm going to put them as, like, their biggest issue, though, is that they're not, like, when I look for range classes on this boss, I count BM Hunter as melee just because their pets can't go to the platform mats. So if I call for range to hit the platform mats, I pick range. But when I look for melee classes, they're not really, like, a good melee class either. But they can do good boss damage, but it's just the fact that, like, they're ranged, but they're not really ranged. So they don't have all the utility that melee would have. They do have an immunity, they have self-heals, so they do have a lot of good personals and utility for the third phase, which can help a lot. And their single target damage isn't that bad either. They did get a big buff this week, so I'm going to throw them down as B, just because they got a really big buff this week, so they will be a higher up in damage, so it'll be a lot closer to Marksman. If in some cases it'll be better than Marksman. All right, next one up is Marksman. Marksman, it's basically the exact same thing as BM, except they actually are a range class. They have more burst, damage is a little bit better, so I'm gonna put them as A. Like, it's all the same utility, same defenses, same personals, that kind of stuff, except they're ranged and they're burstier class. So I'm gonna throw them up as A, but now they're a lot closer. So I'm not too sure after 9.0.5 how they're gonna line up, but currently this is how it's looking. All right, Survival Hunter. Out of the couple of Survival Hunters I've actually had do this boss, they've actually performed very, very, very well. The good thing about Survival Hunter is that they are they're pure single targets, so boss damage is actually really, really good. And when it comes down to this fight, the most important thing for this fight is single target damage. Yes, there's a lot of ads, a lot of people get that confused. When it comes down to things, this boss is a single target fight, and you need that big single target damage on Sire, and Survival Hunters actually pump Survival Hunter damage. Meme? No, they actually aren't a meme for this boss fight. And Mythic, yes. For Heroic, no. All of the Survival Hunters we brought on this fight do a ton of single target damage. They're usually on the top of the meters for it. Yes, for a lot of fights, they are a meme, but they actually do an insane amount of damage for Survival Hunter. Arcane Mage, they're not really a meme class because no one plays them, so I'm going to have to put them as F. The things I can say about Arcane Mage, play Fire. If you don't like Fire, play Frost. There's honestly not enough people playing Arcane Mage to really see what's going on. It's just a hard class to grade. For the Arcane Mages that we have gotten in, they haven't performed well at all. And generally speaking, like, if they do somewhat well on other boss fights, Sire damage is always a lot lower. So, like, you can't really go off their parses on other fights because Sire just plummets. On the other side of things, we got Fire Mage. Fire Mage is going to be it's 100% our first S tier class. They have their burst up every minute. They have unlimited defensives, immunities. They bring in the mage buff. For this fight, it's just way too good. It's good for the cleave. It's good for the single target. Like I said, they have their mage buff, they have their ice block, they have their shields, they have blinks. They have unlimited survivability, they bring raid buffs, and they bring a ton of damage, both single target and multi-target. Then on the other hand, we have Frost Mage. Now, we haven't had many Frost Mages actually perform well in this fight. I don't think this fight is very good for Frost Mage because you either go pure single target or not. Generally speaking, even Frost Mages that do go single target, their damage falls off a lot compared to a lot of other bosses. I've had Frost Mages that come in, they orange parcel in other boss fights, and then they come in Sire and they just hit the 3k benchmark on this boss. For Frost Mage, I'm probably going to put it as D. It's not as bad as Arcane Mage, but in my opinion, it's one of the worst specs for this fight. I have yet to see a high performing Frost Mage do this fight, but so as of right now, I'm going to throw it as D. It's better than Arcane, but it's not doing well for this fight at all. Brewmaster Monk. I'm gonna start comparing them off of Blood DK. The good things for Brewmaster Monk in the first phase, they have their Transcendence, and same thing with the third phase too. Like they have their Transcendence as well, which can help them with mobility. They actually do have mobility, so if they need to move the boss somewhere fast in the third phase, they can do so with their Chi Torpedo. They bring in a raid buff for the 5% physical damage. I mean, their survivability is good. Their damage can be good. I'm going to put them one tier ahead of... I think they're a little bit... Actually, you know what? No, because Blood also has AMZ. I'm going to put them on the same boat as Blood. There honestly just hasn't been that many Brewmaster tanks. There's just not that many out there. Overall, they're not bad. If you don't have a Windwalker Monk, then they go up higher, but in most cases you have a Windwalker Monk, so you don't really need their buff in general. All right, Mistweaver Monk. It's gonna be our first meme class. At this point in the game, it's a meme spec. It's a meme spec. If you're doing Sun King, it's great. If you're not doing Sun King, it's a meme class. I mean, it can be good. It can be good. If you got innervates, Mistweaver's a meme. At least give it an F. It's a meme. See, like the difference between Arcane and Mistweaver is that people don't play Arcane. People actually play Mistweaver. That's the difference. Windwalker for this boss. You see, the good thing for Windwalker is that it has a lot of cleave. Plus it brings the buff, and they have a lot of survivability. They have movement, which is really good. The issue of Windwalker that most monks struggle with on this fight is that their boss damage actually is a lot lower. So if I'm looking at Windwalker logs, I'm comparing it a lot closer to a survival or to a BM hunter than I would be like comparing it to like a marksman. Like for a Windwalker, like yes, the cleave is really good for first and second phase, but it falls off a lot in the third phase if they're not like really set up for single target. All right, first healer, HPAL. From what I've seen from HPAL, I'm going to throw it under B. The good thing for HPAL, it brings damage, which for honestly for heroic side, like you don't necessarily need like yes, damage is important, but like it's not game changing for the healers to be doing crazy amounts of damage. So it's not like you need every min-max amount of damage. The damage reduction is huge if it's used properly in the third phase for all the Hand of Destructions. If you actually use it when you're supposed to use AM, it can come in handy like crazy. Their output's really good. They're a really good healer. It's just they're not like, it's not like consistent big like DRs for the third phase, for instance. Like you'll have 1 AM for like the third phase hand, so you got to pick which one you want it to be on. They're a good class. Like they're good class. If you don't have an HPAL, it's not going to be like, it's not the end of the world if you don't have an HPAL in your group. All right, Frost DK. Frost DK right now, in my opinion, is actually doing really well. It's very underplayed, and for those that play it, a lot of times it's not played correctly. But we've had people who play Frost DK just absolutely destroy single target damage. It's doing very well for single target damage. Plus it brings AMZ to the fight as well, which is huge on this fight. Plus you got Death's Advance for first phase, which comes in handy too. I'm only going to put it in B tier just because I haven't seen enough people play Frost really well. I have seen a couple play Frost really well, and I think it has very good potential, but I just haven't seen enough people play it really well to really give it a higher rating. I think the potential for Frost is very high right now. It's underplayed, and when you're comparing it to Unholy, it's just not close enough. All right, Prop Paladin. So the thing for Prop Paladins is like they bring their Paladin buff, which is nice for the raid. Their damage is very good, but when it comes down to the third phase, they're going to be taking an insane amount of damage. Like the third phase is huge on damage. They do a lot of damage. They bring the buff. They have a lot of like a lot of good unused defensives, but once you're out of that, it's really up to the healers to keep them alive, and in clutch situations it's not too good. Movement is a little bit lacking too in the third phase. If you do have to bring the boss somewhere, or like just like move the boss somewhere quick in general, all they have is their pony, and once that's gone, I mean they're a little bit limited there. Rep Pally. Rep Pally, I'm probably going to put it as C as well. They're very good for all the cleave on the ads. Like they're very good for nuking the ads in the first and second phase. The issue of Rep Pallies, it will be the same with a bunch of other classes coming up, is that as soon as you get to the third phase, their boss damage will start to fall off. Like they have their wings up, but as soon as wings are gone, they're just going to be doing next to nothing on the boss. And since the third phase is a single target DPS race, that's where Rep Pally will start to fall off. All right, Disc Priest. Disc Priest is getting nerfed today with Spirit Shell with the 905, but not too sure how that's going to affect the game, so I'm going to base it off of how they have been performing. This Priest is going to be the first S tier healer. The Spirit Shell is insane. It's a huge, like, yeah, as long as this Priest is played right, it is by far the best healer in the game. Spirit Shell is up every minute, which does an insane amount of damage reduction, and for the third phase, like for throughout the entire boss fight, it's like big chunks of damage. And having all the DERs up on the raid is insane. Like, especially since they're always up, it's going to be doing an insane amount of damage reduction. And overall, it's going to make the fight a lot easier to heal. There's going to be a lot less random deaths from people that don't use personals, and it's just going to help out a lot. H Priest. I'm going to put H Priest as a B tier healer. The reason why it's going to be B tier instead of A tier is mostly because of utility. So for this fight, since it is a lot of big bursty damage, the most important utility and healing is the damage reductions. When you go from half health to 0, or like 3/4 health to 0, healing that isn't going to do anything. But having a damage reduction that prevents you from going 3/4 to 0 comes in handy a lot more. Now the H Priest output is huge for this fight with Salve, the output's really good. When it comes down to it, it's the damage reductions that are actually huge. The damage reductions are what makes or breaks this fight, and it makes it a lot easier to deal with. Shadow Priest, I'm gonna give to A tier. So there's two different types of Shadow Priests for this fight. There's Shadow Priests that run Shadow Crash, just spam Mind Seer on everything. Or is it? Yeah, it's Mind Seer, Shadow Crash, and whatever their other AoE thing. There's Shadow Priests that run their AoE build and they parse really high because they pad hard on the first 2 phases. And then there's Shadow Priests that go with the entire single target build and just absolutely destroy the boss the entire fight. If you're playing an AoE Shadow Priest, you can go sit down here with your AoE classes. If you play single target Shadow Priests, that's where I think you get the A tier. They have execute talents for the 3rd phase, which is huge, and plus like the distributive damage overall on the boss is just an insane amount of damage. And it's very good. They do have a good damage reduction CD. They have, they could always heal themselves if they had to, but I'm mainly looking at the single target damage, and Shadow Priests are very good for single target right now. Plus they have executes, which is also very good. All right, Assassin Rogues. I'm gonna put it in D tier because I have had a couple Sin Rogues do good for single target damage on the boss, but honestly, no one really plays Assassin Rogue right now. I'm sure they're gonna be getting buffed up, and with scaling, they're gonna get better. But as of right now, there's not enough have played it. A lot of people that have played it in my runs haven't done too well. There's been very few Sin Rogues that have actually performed well in this fight, and it was the only reason why it's D and not F because it can do decent single target damage. Outlaw Rogue. Outlaw Rogue is going to be I'm going to put it as A tier. Outlaw, I'd say, is probably like the closest. Actually, I could probably rank it from like top to bottom on these. So like the closer you are to like the left side, the higher you are. Actually, yeah, let me reorder. Okay, Outlaw Rogue. It does very good cleave. It's very good single target. It's a lot of burst windows that you can use throughout the entire fight. And a lot of very good survivability. Overall, Outlaw has just been performing very well on every boss. Sire is no exclusion. They're usually towards the top on Sire damage, usually on top towards ad damage as well. So Outlaw Rogues are performing very well. They have immunity too. Like it's honestly very close to S tier. It's very close to S tier. No, I'm gonna put Outlaw as S tier. I'm gonna put Outlaw as S tier for this fight. And like honestly, almost every single Outlaw Rogue I've had in this fight, they perform very well for both ad and boss damage. And plus, they have a lot of survivability. You have a lot of movement. Overall, Outlaw is just a very good. It's in a very good place right now. And Sub Rogue used to be the best, one of the best specs in the game. Now it's fallen off. Outlaw is the new meta. The good thing for Sub Rogue is that it does do a lot of single target damage. It has a lot of the same utility as Outlaw, but it's just not as good right now. It's not as good like for ad and boss damage. It has fallen off a bit. It's still way better than Sin in my opinion, but it has fallen off. I'm going to put it as B tier just because it can do really good single target damage, but it's nowhere near as good as Outlaw right now. Okay, Elemental Shaman. Elemental can do really good single target too, so I'm probably going to put it in B tier as well. The biggest issue with Elemental is survivability. It's a pretty squishy class. I mean, you have your Astral Shift, but beyond that, you got nothing really. Elemental is good right now if played right. As for enhancement is very dependent. If you have a lot of warriors in your group, you know what, I'm gonna put enhancement up into B2, just because once I get to the warriors, enhancement's gonna make a lot more sense, because enhancement itself isn't that good. But if you have warriors and even havocs, the value of enhancement goes up a ton, and it just gets a lot better. Unholy Dk. So I had Frost in B tier. I'm gonna put Unholy in A tier. It's still very good for ad damage. It's very good for boss damage. You have AMZs. You have a lot of survivability. You have Death's Advance. It's really good right now. I don't think it's S tier just because it doesn't do as much as like in the 3rd phase. It's not gonna do as much as like one of the big single target classes. Compared it to compared to an Outlaw Rogue, I'm gonna put it as S tier too. It's been very, very good. Yeah, it has executes as well. Unholy is good. It's been good if it's played right. See, the thing of Unholy right now is a lot of people play Unholy, but since a lot of people play Unholy, a lot of people also play Unholy wrong. So like you have your really good Unholy players, and then you also have your Unholy players that aren't as good despite them playing a meta class, which is why I kind of want to put it as A, but its potential is a lot higher than what its like average is. Restless Shaman. Spirit Link for Restless Shaman is so huge for first phase as well as the final phase. If you have like two Restless, like for every single pug group I do, I try and get at least 2 Restless Shamans. That being said, like I think you should have at least one Restless Shaman in your group, especially for that third hand of destruction. But the issue with Restless Shamans is that like that's their one big CD. They're limited beyond that, and then they also are lacking like a lot of like own personal, like they have Ankh, which is big, but it's all based around the Spirit Link. 2 is like very good, like that's what you want to go for. 3 is like the best, but if you have 2 Restless Shamans, you're golden. 1 Restless like you at least want 1 though. But just because Spirit Link is such a huge thing on this fight for Hand of Destruction, especially with pug groups, just because odds are a lot of times one of the seeds don't get soaked during a Hand of Destruction or the first and third, and if a seed doesn't get soaked for the first or third, usually you lose like 5-6 people, or it's just a pure wipe. All right, Flexion Warlocks. Flexion Warlocks, it's obvious they're going to be going up top here. Compared to a Fire Mage, so in my opinion, Flexion Warlocks are better for damage, or better just overall because they can dot up all the Cabalists in phase 2. Because they also have Lock Gates, so it is imperative that you have a Warlock for this fight. It makes it a lot easier. They have Lock Rocks, which is insane, and they have, for the third phase 2, their single target damage is also really good. I'm going to put it ahead of Fire Mage. I think it's going to go ahead of Fire Mage. They're very, 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 very well, or they're very, very good. They do a lot of boss damage, do a lot of Cabal damage. They bring Lock Rocks, they bring Lock Gates, and they do have an enemy resolve, although it is a 3-minute CD. I guess Warlocks are just tankier in general, right? Like Warlocks are a very, very, very good spec. All right, Demo Lock. They're not that good right now. Are they an F or a meme? I'm gonna put it as an F, just because like all the Demo Locks I have in, like even if they have high parts on other, like they're a meme. Honestly, yeah. If you're playing a Demo Lock right now, it's kind of a meme. The biggest reason for that is because Affliction is S tier, and Demo Lock, I'd honestly grade it as F tier. But because there's such a big difference between Affliction Lock and Demo Lock. All right, Destro Warlock. I'm gonna put Destro Warlock as C tier. It's not like it's okay if it's played right, but it's not that great either. I'm putting it as C tier just because. If you don't have an Affliction Warlock, you need at least a Destro for Lock Rocks for the gates. But like honestly, like I'd put it like right by Frost Mage. All right, time for the Warriors. Despite being a meme for so many bosses, Warriors on this fight are actually the complete opposite of a meme. Warriors are actually extremely good on this fight. I talked about that on my guide on this fight. They are very, very good because they do add damage, and then for the third phase, when it comes down to execute, they execute. Both Warrior specs are good at damage. I would have to say that Fury is the better version though than Arms. Correct me if I'm wrong, Warriors. I'm pretty sure Fury is the better version than Arms for this fight. Just overall for the single target, like for the single target execute at the end, as well as like just the ad like cleave throughout the fight. Prot Warrior. Prot Warrior is, in my opinion, the second best tank for this fight. This boss does do a lot of physical damage. Prot Warriors, that's the only thing that they're good at, so that helps out a lot. They bring an extra rally, they bring an extra, if you don't have an Arms or a Fury Warrior, they bring the shout. I really like tanking the Prot Warriors on this fight. In my opinion, they're one of the better tanks on this fight. They're not S tier, but I think it's fine that they're A tier because because of their physical damage reduction, they're very, very good on this fight for the second and third phase. Okay, Havoc Demon Hunters are going to be, in my opinion, a D clear. Yeah, I'm going to say they're D tier. Actually, you know what? I'm going to move Sin Rogue down to F tier. And then I'm going to move Havoc above Frost. So the issue of Havoc right now is that, or I guess the good thing of Havoc right for this fight is that even if you go full Demon Blades, full single target spec, you can still do cleave as well in the first 2 phases. The issue with Demon Hunters on this fight is that not many Demon Hunters like going the single target spec. I don't blame them. It's an AFK auto attack spec. But if it's played right, it can be okay. The S are higher in the meters because of odd damage, but when it comes down to actual Sire damage, it's towards the bottom. Vengeance, on the other hand, in my opinion, is the best tank for this fight. And in my opinion, for almost every single fight in the raid, Vengeance is probably the best tank. So yeah, in my opinion, Vengeance is the best tank for, like, yes, I play Vengeance, so it might be a little bit biased, But there's movement, there's unlimited defensives that you can use. You have unlimited cooldowns. You basically have 9 lives nowadays with Vengeance, so you never die, or you never actually die. The damage is good. Like just overall, I think Vengeance is the best tank for this fight, as well as most of the other fights in the raid. And plus, since you normally don't have a Havoc Demon Hunter in the group because they're bad, the Vengeance also brings you 5% magic buff on the bosses too. Alright, Druid time. Last but not least. Balanced Druids, in my opinion, are S tier. They've been S tier this entire tier. Single target and multi-target are both very, very good. They bring Roar, which is huge for movement. They bring battle reses. They have bark skin up every minute. So, in my opinion, I think Druids are they're definitely one of the better DPS in this fight. They're good for the cleave, they're good for the single target, and they have a lot of defensives. They bring a lot of raid utility. Overall, Druids are very, very good. Feral Druid. Feral Druid, I'm actually going to put it as A tier for this fight. Not like high A tier. Actually, let me move arms up there. They're not like the top of the A tier list, but Feral Druids actually do extremely well in this fight. I've had a lot of Feral Druids come in, and they just do insane Sire damage, and then they can also still do cleave during the ads as well. So, like, in my opinion, I'd say Survival and Feral are very similar in the sense that they're not played much, but they both do very, very good boss damage. Feral is just, in my opinion, much better because it also brings Roar. It also brings a lot of defensives. It's just overall, like, it does do really, really good damage despite not being played as much. Bear tanks, I think I'm going to put it as B tier for bear tanks. I think they're a little bit better than the other classes just because Roar is so important for this fight, and the more movement speed, the more movement buffs you have for the first phase and the third phase, it just makes it that much easier. So I'm going to put them in B tier. They have their charge if they get knocked back. And they do have good survivability. Yeah, it's a very boring... It's just like you're a bear. You're tanking as a bear, but for this fight, bears generally do well. I would take a bear tank over these other 3. Mainly, the biggest reason why I like the Druids is because of their Roar. Their Roar adds so much more value to the class. So it makes it very, very good. Last spec in the game is the Wrestler Druid. So the thing for Wrestler Druids, they don't have like a big raid CD. Like you guys have your you have your Tranquility, that's what it is, and then you also have your Flourish, I think, is the one that increases all your hots. The good thing that I like about the Wrestler Druids is that it's constant healing throughout the fight. Everyone has hots up. It's like everyone's getting healed consistent throughout the fight. The issue with them is that you lose all of your like you just don't have like a big valuable CD. Now you have Roar, which is good. You have Battle Res, which is good. But when it actually comes to a big raid CD, it's very, very limited, in my opinion. Convoke and Trank, those are just like pure, like it's a pure healing CD. Like it's not like a good DR. And even for Trank, like if Trank was an instant cast, I would say Trank is a lot better. But since Trank is also a channel, it just makes it a little bit more rough. I'm gonna put the Wrestle Druid in. You know what? Like, I wouldn't say it's that much worse than like H Priest or H Pal. Like, honestly, I'm just gonna throw it in with the B tier with the other 2. Like, there's not really like a bad, like, except for Mistweaver, there's not really a bad healing spec. Like, they're all good. Some of them are just better than the others. So basically, whenever I'm for my AOTC groups, whenever I'm looking at groups for Sire, this is basically what I look at. Like, so the higher up you are on the list, the lower I look at, like, the lower I expect your parses to be for other bosses before I bring you in, because like, you're just naturally gonna be doing better on this boss fight. I think this is accurate. How this is gonna change with the 905 buff that came out today, I'm not too sure. I mean, we're gonna have to play it out, see how the different buffs work at different classes, different specs. It may change, it may not, but this is how I feel about all of these current specs and classes about since we last did Sire.